Thank you for attending my dissertation proposal hearing. This work, entitled Dungeons & Dragons as Game-Based Learning, is intended towards the fulfillment of the Educational Linguistics doctoral program with the University of New Mexico. Each section is denoted at the bottom to show our progress throughout the presentation. Please take note of your questions so that I may answer them at the end. Thank you again for joining me here. I appreciate the time and attention that you are choosing to share with me today. As a teacher practitioner, I have observed that students are no longer motivated by the traditional model of education. This is a problem. The sage on the stage has long since fallen on dead ears. In the age of technology, student engagement quickly drops when compared to the surrounding milieu amongst the digital landscape. Teachers need an instructional model that will provide experience-based educational activities that place students at the center of their own learning in an active role. Communication has ever been at the center of human education. Over time, we've evolved our communication education. Ancient oral traditions of nascent societies eventually progressed to embrace and develop writing and rhetoric. These skills flourished under pens wielded during the Age of Enlightenment, but it wasn't until after the Industrial Revolution that education widely became a public service offered as part of the social contract. Beyond this, we now find ourselves in the post-industrial, service-oriented age of technology and information. Under the information age, students need a novel approach towards interacting with literature and curricula. As noted in the statement of problem, the sage on the stage no longer serves the needs of modern students. Furthermore, it does not provide an experiential, student-centered learning that students need in order to be prepared for life and work in our current society. I argue that gamification of the curricula and classroom can help. Skills such as critical thinking, media literacy, collaboration, flexibility, creativity, social and leadership skills, often identified as 21st century skills, are supported through interactive storytelling activities. Games may provide the valuable opportunity we need for a student to become a hero. Training and skill development can be fun. Students may learn to see challenges and obstacles as opportunities for growth. Strength of character and building personal integrity and compassion may also be a goal. Through collaborative play, students learn to work together and grow in empathy. This again better supports the skills needed in today's workforce. Education need not be a Sisyphean hardship for students or for teachers. Each of these achievements may also be worked into the curricula, and activities can be aligned with state standards. This study focuses on the use of game-based learning via Dungeons & Dragons as an interactive storytelling activity to support middle school learners. To be more specific, the study seeks to determine if D&D as game-based learning would increase student perceived motivation, engagement, and alignment to classroom skills. These 5 takeaways will prove important for the purposes of the study. Details on each will be further supported by the review of literature and methodology sections. Number 1, gamification is generally found to increase motivation and engagement. Number 2, game-based learning is a method of instruction. Number 3, skill development during interactive storytelling is multifaceted. 4, collaborative play is engaging. 5, D&D is a liminal space in academia. There are 3 research questions which drive this study. Research question number 1. How are student perceptions of motivation and engagement affected using Dungeons & Dragons as interactive storytelling? Research question number 2. What are student perceptions of interactive storytelling regarding its alignment to skill development in the middle school curriculum? Research question number 3. How is Dungeons & Dragons a useful learner engagement strategy in the middle school classroom? Researcher positionality is always worthy of note. I wanted to denote, I was raised in a low socioeconomic status environment and attended public education institutions for both primary and secondary schooling. This background is cause for my desire to improve public school classrooms. My proposed study will take place in a public secondary school setting with student demographics ranging from low SES to middle SES. These demographics are also very similar to my own life experiences across school settings. I've taught at middle schools both nationally and internationally. While the geography changes, I continue to see challenges in student motivation and engagement. These factors are of paramount importance in the field of education. My proposed study will focus on both motivation and engagement of middle school students regarding the use of gamification in the classroom through interactive storytelling and the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. It is also worthy to note that I am a gamer. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for 20 years. I played D&D specifically for over a decade. I previously used games like D&D to supplement my classroom instruction, but I intend to conduct this study so I may collect student data to better inform my decisions for its use in the future. I also intend to share my findings with other practitioner researchers to further our collective knowledge in the field of education. Now, about D&D. We'll briefly cover the history, objectives, setup, skills, character creation, and a brief example of play. In 2012, shortly after I began my own teaching career, American intellectual Neil deGrasse Tyson addressed Congress seeking funding to support NASA. He spoke about the innovations America achieved when we supported those who dared to dream. In support of that, he shared a quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and this has always stuck with me. He said, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea." Education should follow this advice. We should teach passions rather than create lemmings for factory lines and clerical work. The discoveries of education should be self-motivating. Students should take the helm and command their own ships towards educational horizons that are authentic and relevant to themselves and their own desired futures. My intended research will focus on student motivation and engagement to better serve students through a novel approach to game-based learning using Dungeons & Dragons. The beauty and intrigue of tabletop role-playing games like D&D can be found in the veritable adaptability of the story. Storytelling is in our nature, and our stories have always been educational. Good storytelling demonstrates the pinnacle of our communication skills. It allows the players to take up the mantle of a character they themselves create. Through the practice of identity construction, that is, building characters and backstories, they get to choose roles, responsibilities, and their relationships to the group. Each player practices copious skills through play. Communication skills are perhaps the most abundant in practice. However, other classroom skills also occur throughout play. There have been several versions or editions of D&D since its inception in 1974. Each has its own set of rules, though the basic principles are usually the same. This study uses the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, which was published by Wizards of the Coast in 2014. This is the newest and most up-to-date version of Dungeons & Dragons. Originally, the game was created by medieval enthusiasts to recreate battles using maps and figurines. The game of D&D gained popularity with a wider audience because it focused on the individual and small group adventure narratives, rather than using legions and armies in battle. This gave players a chance to become the heroes themselves as protagonists in their own stories through gameplay. Medieval literature heralds upon high the Arthurian cycle and the Great Grail quest, the elusive object always worthy of chase. I believe that the gamification of education is a worthy successor of this pursuit. In D&D, player pursuits may be motivated by this same passion. Regarding the onset of the game, each game session is led by a dungeon master, often referred to as the DM, who plans the story arcs and the overall campaign setting. The story progression is co-created and negotiated according to the player decisions in-game as they work collaboratively towards quest objectives. The DM facilitates the immersive experience during the adventure using non-player characters known as NPCs to provide opportunities for player interactions and challenges. Traditionally, for in-person games, players gather around a table with the DM to co-create the narrative during play, each ready with their personalized character sheet and a handful of dice to roll in the player spaces around the table. However, in the digital play environment, this setup is represented on the computer screen using a shared map that each player sees and uses character tokens that players are given control to move on the map. With the increased popularity of D&D in recent years, many companies now produce highly detailed maps for the established story modules and frequently used terrains. Player tokens representing player characters often appear on the map alongside NPC and monster tokens placed by the DM to support the visualization when using maps. Dungeons & Dragons promotes the development of social skills. It is, after all, a collaborative teamwork through interactive storytelling. Decision-making skills are practiced in every game. Meaning-making regularly occurs as players learn about the consequences of their actions and must apply this new knowledge for future character interactions. This necessitates the analysis and evaluation of information and social experiences. Collaboration and turn-taking is also built into the game mechanics. In order to better understand the rules, trial and error of character actions often occur early on in the campaign. Imagination and creativity may flourish with continued opportunities for creative problem solving to overcome the various story obstacles while strategizing in a group. Characters are created by selecting from available classes, races, attributes, and skills at level 1. Later, more is added as each character levels up to fit their experience and training in the story. 6 attributes govern most of the action and skill modifiers: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. During character creation, players must assign a value to each of these attributes. All actions and skills are connected to one of these attributes. For example, a wizard character may want to put their highest attribute value into intelligence because intelligence is the most important attribute for casting wizard spells. Whereas a fighter character may want to put their highest value into strength because it is the most important attribute for melee fighting with a large sword and performing athletic skills. Once attribute values are chosen, each value corresponds to the modifiers that are added to the dice rolls for actions in the game. The higher value of the attribute, the higher the modifier bonus will be. A wizard that only has an 11 intelligence has a 0 modifier bonus to their dice rolls to cast spells, whereas a wizard that has a 16 in intelligence gets a +3 modifier to add to their dice rolls to cast spells. This game mechanic helps to balance play while giving players a statistical advantage to perform their specialized niche role in the group and feel valued as a member of the group. Polyhedral dice are rolled in the game to determine success or failure of these proposed player actions. Dice are usually referred to according to how many sides they contain. D6s, therefore, are the iconic 6-sided dice that most often come to mind when we think of dice, as 1d6 is a cube with 6 sides. 1d4, therefore, is a single die with 4 sides. 2d4 would be 2 dice with 4 sides each. All actions require the d20 as the base roll, and then other bonuses are added to the total. Consequently, each roll of the dice becomes practice for quick mental math, as each roll of the d20 gains at least 1 or 2 other numbers to be added to it. Here's a brief example of gameplay. The DM says, "You see a bandit running away after pulling a villager off his horse and robbing him. What do you do?" Player 1, a fighter, says, "If I see the villager is okay, then I run after the bandit." DM, "Okay, The villager doesn't seem to need immediate medical help, so you begin to run after the bandit. Does anyone else want to jump into action? Player 2, a wizard. I run up to the villager on the ground and ask if I can borrow his horse. I'll bring it right back, I promise. The DM, good thinking. You can see the bandit has quite a lead running ahead of the fighter, but I'll need an animal handling check using your wisdom modifier. If you're trained in the animal handling skill, then you can also add your proficiency bonus. The player 2 wizard, damn it, Jim, I'm a wizard, not a stable boy. Just kidding, I'm not trained in it. My wisdom modifier is a 0. I only rolled a 9 on my d20. Player 3, the ranger, I can help. I'm trained in animal handling. Can I try to calm the horse and use the help action to aid the wizard for advantage on the roll? The DM, certainly, that's good teamwork. Since you're trained in the skill, you can calm down the horse without a roll, and that will grant advantage to the wizard so that she can roll again, taking the best result from the 2 d20s. The wizard, player 2, yes, I got a 16 this time on my d20. The DM, that will do it. The difficulty was only set at 12, so you beat it. The horse calms down and submits to your direction in the saddle. What do you do next? Player 2, the wizard, I yell, giddy up, and tear off after the bandit. The DM, excellent. Player 1, let's return to you. You've been running after the bandit. Let's check your pace. Give me an athletic skill check with your strength ability modifier to see how fast a pace you're able to keep while running over this distance. Player 1, the fighter, I got a 13 on my d20, but I'm trained in athletics, so I get to add the +2 skill proficiency and the +2 strength modifier, so my total is actually 17. The DM says, all right, that's great. You are gaining on the bandit with great speed. You'll be able to overtake him in 3 rounds. And we'll say that the animal handling with the help took 2 of the rounds so far, so you're only 1 more round before you catch up to the bandit. As you can see, interactive storytelling through D&D can be exciting and demonstrates many skills and negotiations along the way. Next, we will turn to the review of literature. The review of literature organizes into 2 main parts. Part 1 covers the foundations. We will define terms and problems leading to the shift in pedagogy. Part 2 covers specific areas of gamification in education across the literature. The use of games in the classroom has become known as the gamification of education. According to Gressick and Langston in 2017, they define gamification as applying gaming elements and structures to classroom environments. The Gressick and Langston definition positions classroom gamification in its simplest form, as the use or addition of game elements in a classroom. It is important to distinguish the limits of the term. Playing a word search in a language arts class after reading does meet the requirements of gamification, yet this is not instruction. Some educational research, Gressick and Langston included, take extra care to include the caveat that beneficial gamification is not usually achieved by simply adding reward titles and classroom economies to the traditional banking education model. Gressick and Langston further warn that for gamification to truly impact participant learning in positive ways, the integration of game-inspired elements must go beyond superficial integrations like points or badges. So, clearly, there must be more preparation and planning to embrace and interweave gamification into the classroom. It cannot just be an add-on activity. This is where game-based learning, or GBL, comes into play. GBL occurs when games are used as a method of instruction, a tool to facilitate the learning experience with students at the center. Games in the classroom may take many different forms. Some are add-ons, such as a trivia game used after instruction, or the word search mentioned previously. Some are integrated into the learning process itself, however. Imagine these 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1. A class is given articles to read about the American Revolutionary War. After reading, the students are divided into teams and compete to earn points by answering questions about the content they read. This is an add-on style game. It can be used or not used to supplement the instruction. The instruction was actually the activity of reading. The trivia game is really just a form of assessment, a checking for understanding for the students. Add-ons like this are fundamentally separate from the main learning process. Now, imagine scenario number 2. Another class of students is learning about the American Revolutionary War as well, but is involved in simulations or role-play games as instruction. The students may take on the real or imagined identities of American colonists during the 1760s. Events, debates, actions may be role-played as part of the game to help students learn and understand the perspective of colonists during this pivotal period leading to the American Revolution. Games like this cannot be removed from the instruction process because they are integrated into the instruction. This is a game-based learning model, or a GBL. This GBL occurs when games are used as the learning process, not merely in addition to it. Both are valuable, and both scenarios qualify as gamification, but a GBL goes a step further and puts gameplay at the heart of the learning process as a method of instruction. Paulo Freire in 1996 refers to the traditional transference of knowledge as banking education. Teachers today must understand the importance of moving away from the idea that they are the source or fountain of educational knowledge, waiting to fill empty vessels with knowledge. Look at this image you can see from Waiting for Superman, which depicts Freire's banking model of education. As teachers, we must provide opportunities for knowledge production through students' own experiences. The same driving philosophies of project-based learning, or PBL, can be found in game-based learning, or GBL. Given this need, the opportunity for learning by experience, it is no wonder that gamification is sweeping its way into peer-reviewed journals across academia. Student-centered gaming also serves students beyond academics and promotes healthy social behaviors. According to Salzanik in 2018, teachers and therapists have seen that students build real-life self-esteem when they serve in a valued role in a group of adventurers. So, student-centered pedagogy helps break down barriers and builds trust to allow students to learn from one another. Good classroom leaders are not dictators, they're facilitators. Every strong leader must learn to let go of power and release it, giving it to those whom they serve. Teacher facilitators often find themselves naturally in alignment to a student-centered pedagogy. For the purposes of game-based learning, this means that eventually all of the rules taught to students so that they may begin to take the reins of a project. After all, knowledge of the rules is power, so that one may play the game without the disadvantage of ignorance. Sharing power is a valuable skill because it allows students to gain the opportunity to carry the mantle of leadership themselves. In this way, students gain experience working on a team. They gain experience leading and grow closer to becoming the hero. One of the unique benefits found in RPGs is identity construction. Identity is important. It is who we are and who we want to be. In middle school, children are in an age of becoming. They are transcending into young adulthood. For some, it's a time of identity crisis. They must figure out who they want to be, at times against what others might predict or expect. In Dungeons & Dragons, the players create their own characters or add their own flair to the persona they play. In this way, students become more invested in the game than students who are given pre-made cookie-cutter characters. The character ownership increases investment and therefore increases engagement. The role of identity also provides a valuable opportunity for lessons in empathy. Players may begin to better understand how it feels to be a member of another group of people. Garcia 2017 provided an excellent jumping board for educators to learn common discourse around the privilege and oppression issues of the real world through role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. Valuable discussions involving critical theory can spring from reflections of gameplay when oppression appears in a game as a mirror or a real issue of the observations in our own society. By making content interesting to the student, a teacher may build the necessary structure to overcome the obstacle of disinterest. The connection for gamification lies in the malleability and ductility of storytelling. A story can be told about any topic. Narratives and characters can be formed with collaboration from students within the learning community itself. This leads to investment and a feeling of ownership. In 2018, Sun and Hsia measured intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The research suggests integrating the gamification element with classroom teaching to make English classes more interesting and attractive to learners. Furthermore, the competitive effect brought about by the games and the friendly interactions amongst peers can make students more interested in the lesson. Molnar showed that the presence of gamification led to an increase in classroom discussions and in students' engagement with the learning objectives taught by the interactive digital storytelling. From these findings, we see again and again that gamification in many forms is tied to factors of motivation and engagement. When I began teaching in 2010, the focus of classroom management was building relationships and holding students accountable to classroom behavior expectations. In 2011, Class Dojo, Remind 101, and others were founded and began to spread across the United States public school systems. Software programs like these help to launch classroom management into the digital age through interactive response systems. In 2013, Classcraft was founded and helped to bring ideas from other digital classroom management systems into the fantasy setting. Classcraft piggybacked on the popularity of World of Warcraft, a prominently popular massive multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG. Whereas Class Dojo and its ilk focused on systematic data collection, Classcraft gave focus to its systematic structure for character building. It aligned itself to the draw of the mythic hero's journey and that attraction that students hold towards leveling up. Brotherton, Sim, and Reed in 2016 sought to evaluate Classcraft for the integration into primary school classrooms in the United Kingdom. The study critiques the behavior management tool itself and presents data related to the limitations and barriers of implementation as perceived by teachers, parents, and students. The greatest concern found by teachers was increased scheduling needs for an already overloaded requirement of time in class and during lesson preparations. Manilev et al. In 2018 led a study to examine Class Dojo with a critical lens. They described Class Dojo as a new data-based variation on behaviorism, which relies heavily on compliance techniques while creating a performative classroom culture in which students are reconstructed as statistical data representations. Manilev et al. 2018 further drew many connections between the digital behavior tracking tool and Foucault's 1979 concept of the panopticon, originally envisaged for surveillance purposes in prisons. You can see the drawing here from Jeremy Bentham. Using critical analysis theory, the authors conclude that hidden beneath a technological layer, Class Dojo is merely a mechanism for control based on older ideas and practices utilizing the datafication of school discipline and student behavior. The research of Correa and Santos in 2017 used a qualitative research methodology and measures the advantages and disadvantages of Kahoot according to the perspectives of teachers and students in a teacher education program. The study found these perspectives to be positive overall and reported the results demonstrate that this tool can be motivating and very useful for learners' assessments. According to Subhash and Kudney, technology in classrooms has inspired a shift of traditional classroom lectures towards integrated digital learning environments. An empirical study utilizing a mixed methods approach is presented in Rubino, Barbaras, and Molnati in 2018, wherein a digital storytelling platform was used in secondary school instruction to promote interactivity and collaboration. The researchers reference constructivism and social interaction theory by Yusuf Vygotsky. Findings demonstrated that using digital storytelling as an active learning technique leads to an increase in student attention. Another study taking place in a secondary school using interactive digital storytelling is Molnar 2018, this time in a microbiology classroom using a problem-based learning approach. Students took on the role of detectives on the digital storytelling platform to solve a related mystery using their content area knowledge. Molnar 2018 found that gamification led to an increase in classroom discussion and engagement. Nam, in 2017, investigated the effects on digital storytelling in an online collaborative learning environment. The study took place with students randomly assigned to the experimental and comparison groups from 4 middle school chemistry classes. Survey results demonstrated that the digital storytelling group was significantly more effective for improving online communication, interactivity, and social presence in the online collaborative learning environment. The best practices regarding the delivery of instruction have been modified over and over through the years and must continue to be modified because each class of students is different in its collection of needs and desires for its own learning communities. One such change to the delivery of instruction is the flipped classroom model. This model gives students access to course content and materials before instruction is given rather than during or after instructional time. In this way, students are asked to review readings or often videos before classroom interaction takes place. This interaction may be face-to-face or moderated through digital means such as the use of online forums frequently used in online classes. Zhou et al. In 2018 provided a comparison study between a flipped classroom and a gamified flipped classroom. The study showed that a gamified flipped classroom increased both preparation, participation, and the interest of students when compared to the traditional flipped classroom. Consequently, we can see that gamification may increase participation by motivating students to engage with the class content. In another article, Kathy Checkley in 2015 notes that in gamified classrooms, students are players, teachers the game masters, a quiz may be a quest. When the delivery of instruction is perceived as an adventure or a quest, it often hooks the interest of students. It is the hero's journey ingrained into our cultural psyche. Joseph Campbell in 1968 argued the idea of the hero's journey, or the monomyth, the mythic structure of storytelling that acts as the foundational fabric from which all great tales are woven. In his interview with Bill Moyers in 1991, Campbell implies that we all have in us a desire for a rite of passage, and that this rite is often completed through our own means of a hero's journey. Education is a journey, and the students are the heroes. The role of the educator is that of the wizened sage, acting not as the main protagonist, but as an advisor and facilitator to the heroes along their journey. Not the sage on the stage, but as Gandalf to Bilbo, a guide that may eventually disappear altogether after advising the group of adventurers. A study by Kavoda and De Roca in 2018 states that RPG-based learning can help learners develop not only their speaking and interpersonal skills, but also their autonomy. Regarding language learning classrooms, Kavoda de Roca also reported learners working collaboratively to solve problems and make complex decisions not only concerning the language itself, but also concerning the situations proposed in the role play. As an action research study by Marzuki et al. In 2016 found that the implementation of interactive storytelling strategy increased EFL learners' speaking ability and their classroom activities. The findings were subdivided into 8 important aspects of the student activities. 1. Asking referential questions. 2. Explaining their reasons and or ideas. 3. Retelling the folktale. 4. Asking display questions. 5. Answering classmates' questions. 6. Helping or asking for help from each other. 7. Responding to the teacher's instructions. And 8. Answering the teacher's questions. Aside from the specific technology literacy, these skills all again provide evidence for the alignment to the 21st century skills that are deemed necessary for education in the information age. Studies like these further support my lean towards the use of D&D as game-based learning. Schwarzwalder in 2007 reported the benefits of cooperative play and the limitations of quiz games. This further supports some of the differences between an add-on game and just traditional gamification rather than game-based learning for using gaming as a means of instruction. Schwarzwalder said the quiz-like nature of these games limited their usefulness as teaching tools and led to aggressive play and the early elimination of players. On the other hand, cooperative tabletop games and those in which players compete to attain a specific score promote participation and teamwork, are challenging, and encourage players to have fun. The literature has demonstrated a variety of gamification possibilities in the classroom. Game-based learning has stood out as the strongest platform for gamified learning in consideration for the delivery of instruction. This study leans into the use of interactive storytelling as game-based learning and intends to use Dungeons & Dragons as a platform for interactive storytelling. In 2016, Cengiz Alka produced a study using traditional myth and folktale structures to create role-playing games for literature education in the secondary classroom. Zalka 2016 demonstrated a successful model of using the role-playing game structure of Dungeons & Dragons to teach literature from the high school curriculum. Garcia 2017, as noted earlier, investigated social dynamics that can be developed in Dungeons & Dragons. The study focuses on privilege and power by exploring how systems create, mold, and even maintain identities, such as gender and race identities. Garcia 2017 further pointed out that by understanding the embedded values of these virtual or imagined worlds, this study explores how systems shape specific forms of play. These imagined spaces, as mentioned by Garcia, provide educators an open forum for discussing sensitive topics with students. Wright et al. In 2017 researched the development of moral reasoning in young adults using a customized role-playing game system based on Dungeons & Dragons. In a focus group of 12 college students, the Wright study found that role-playing games can be used to support the development of morality, and in addition, gaming may also facilitate stronger development in post-conventional reasoning. This study made an important differentiation in their findings. Wright et al. 2017 pointed out that we do not yet know whether the same effects would be achieved through an interactive online format. This suggests the question: is game-based learning as effective in an online setting as it is in the in-person setting? Another study focused on teenagers that play tabletop role-playing games, but due to the limitations of the study, also included adults who played previously during their teenage years. Kaler 2017 found that playing tabletop role-playing games improved at least one literacy skill, that greater depth and breadth of tabletop role-playing game experience helped some participants to surmount real or perceived difficulties with reading or speaking. This finding demonstrates support for the use of tabletop role-playing games for developing literacy skills. All in all, I was able to find very few studies conducted specifically using participants that were students of secondary or high education classrooms. As Sidhu and Carter in 2020 pointed out, though the game's resurgence has been widely discussed in non-academic outlets, it has been neglected in academic literature. So, Dungeons & Dragons has gained record-breaking popularity in the last few years, yet academic research focus remains low on its use as a teaching method. To remedy this, let us now look to the methodology for my proposed study. This phenomenological qualitative study will use a practitioner research theoretical framework. The study seeks to determine if game-based learning via Dungeons & Dragons as an interactive storytelling platform should be endorsed and used for classroom instruction or intervention practices to classroom skills. The goal of this study is to find a fun and engaging media that will support development of skills aligned to the middle school curricula. Practitioner research focus on three basic elements for their research: practice, theory, and evaluation. According to Edmonds and Candy in 2010, the practitioner's framework is a conceptual structure that is used to inform evaluation and the development of practice. This emphasizes improved practice as the primary goal. As a practitioner researcher myself, this framework was chosen to support the development of my own professional practice as a teacher. The study will produce data to be evaluated regarding the perceived benefits of using Dungeons & Dragons as interactive storytelling to support the development of classroom skills. The evaluation of this data will lead to the decision for future implications on using interactive storytelling as game-based learning for a teaching method in a gamified classroom setting. The following context applies to my study. The site of the study will be virtual. Participation in the study will be an open call for students across middle school grades 6 through 8 at a K through 8 public charter school located in the Southwest. All students at the school are enrolled in the bilingual program. The current enrolled student population home languages are 50% English, 50% Spanish. Student participants are from the school that I teach at. However, student participation will have no bearing on any class grades for the classes that I teach. Participation is fully optional, and all research will be conducted outside of school hours. I plan to recruit participants from a public middle school grades 6 through 8. I note again that the participant population is one of convenience because I have access through my own employment with the school and district. Preference will be given for students with experience playing tabletop role-playing games like D&D. Secondary preference will be given to attempt to match the participant group to my student population in regard to home languages. I am seeking a small group size of 6 to 8 students for this initial study. I plan to take special care to inform all participants that their participation in the study in no way influences or endangers their school grades. This study will follow all requirements for ethical research as mandated by our IRB office and the city program. Given that this study involves minors, informed consent will be collected for all participants and their parental guardians. The participants in the study are protected by anonymity, and all identity-related data is de-identified before the study is released. The current state of the world is also experiencing and recovering from a health epidemic, so participants are also protected by the added virtual environment. Given these considerations, participants of this study face minimal risk. There will be 6 points of data collected throughout the study. 1. Practitioner research observation journal will be used. 2. Harvey thought journals will be used. 3. Participant surveys. 4. Participant interviews. 5. Character game notes. And 6. The recorded game sessions. Each data material connects to one or more of the research questions that drive the study. Researcher observation journals are used by the practitioner researcher to record observations, thoughts, concerns, and reflections throughout the game sessions. This data is expected to inform research question number 3 and be useful for considerations of future research. The Harvey Thought Journals are adapted from Harvey 2018, wherein a practitioner researcher used journals to study the phenomena of using video games as literature in an 8th grade media literacy class. The thought journals we use will be electronic using Google Docs, which participants have been familiarized with from using them at school. This data is expected to inform research questions 1 and 2 and provide greater freedom for participant expression. Participant surveys are questionnaires used at the beginning, middle, and near the end of the study to check student attitudes and connections to classroom skills. This data is expected to inform research questions 1 and 2 and provide data consistently over the course of the study. Participant interviews will be conducted in the last week of the study. I will meet with students individually for participant interviews, about 30 to 40 minutes each, about the game campaign experience. This data is expected to inform research questions 1, 2, and 3 and bring together the big picture takeaways for participants after the 8 to 10 week experience. Character game notes refer to the physical notebooks given to each participant to use for their own personal notes during gameplay. They will be encouraged to record character development ideas and noteworthy details of the co-created narrative. Each participant will be asked to track their character's progress and goals by writing down what their character is doing when we stop each game session. This data is expected to inform research questions 1, 2, and 3 and show participants' perceived value regarding self-chosen details to record, demonstrate level of engagement, and evidence the organization of the student participants. Finally, each game session will be recorded with screen capture software. The intention is not to collect faces or any identifiable data, but rather to capture interactions and negotiated spaces that are paramount to the discovery and uncovering of the multifaceted phenomena sought in the study. This data is intended for the use of multimedia for stimulus recall during participant interviews and replay as needed to check accuracy of reflections in the research or observation journal. In regard to data analysis, this study will use thematic analysis method to identify meaning from the participant data in an attempt to better understand the student experiences playing D&D. According to Guest, McQueen, and Namey in 2012, thematic analyses move beyond counting explicit words or phrases and focus on identifying and describing both implicit and explicit ideas within the data, that is, themes. The valuable characteristic of thematic analysis as applied to qualitative data is to discover the hidden phenomena relating to the experiences of my students, rather than a dry count of words and phrases for statistical interpretation. The purpose of the study is to explore the perceptions and social interactions which may increase student engagement and motivation while simultaneously supporting middle school classroom skills. Member checking is intended to strengthen the internal validity and further safeguard the participant data by validating the accuracy of statements by the participants themselves. Data of transcripts and findings are shared with the participants to double-check that their intentions are accurately portrayed in the interpretation of the data. Participants may add and edit data as they have shared ownership of it throughout our study. If my proposal is accepted, my intended timeline would allow me to begin work to submit for IRB approval immediately. My data collection will be 8 to 10 weeks, which is comprised of weekly game sessions spanning 2 to 3 hours each. Participant surveys would be distributed and collected online from the beginning, middle, and end of the study. Participant journal entries are written and reviewed weekly following each game session. Participant interviews occur during the final week of the study. Member checking will occur throughout and following the conclusion of the final game so that the participants may verify and validate the accuracy of the data and make changes as needed. De-identification of all data will occur before drafting conclusions and implications. Timeline updates will also be shared with the committee after data collection and during data analysis to prepare scheduling for the dissertation defense. My hope is to finish all of this by late fall 2021 or spring 2022. Again, the primary purpose of this study is to inform teacher practitioners regarding the decision to use D&D as game-based learning in the middle school classroom. The findings will directly contribute to my knowledge and experience as a classroom educator. A follow-up study to the focus on both character growth and empathy may be considered. Another follow-up study to focus on D&D gaming as literature may also be considered. The data may reveal other potential studies, which will be noted in the final version of my dissertation. Thank you once again for attending my proposal. All works cited can be found in my collected chapters of the dissertation proposal.